All right. So welcome everyone. Thanks for being here at my talk about acing the OpenSSF Security Baseline. Hold on. Okay, now here we go. So a little bit about myself. My name is Adolfo García. I usually go by Puerco everywhere. I wear a number of hats around some open source projects. I work with SIG release in Kubernetes in the release engineering team, where we work on some of the tooling that takes care of the supply chain security of the project, that manages the releases that you get from Kubernetes every month. Here in the OpenSSF, I lead the OpenVex project together with Crowd and the Protobomb projects. I'm also a contributor to the SPDX SBOM format, and I maintain a number of SBOM tools around and other smaller open source projects. I try to identify myself as a biker. That's a picture from the before times when there was no COVID or this beer belly. But what this all means is that I spend a lot of time trying to think about how to secure open source projects at scale and how the tools that we're building fit together to build a better security story about open source. For my day job, I work at a small startup called Stacklok. We've been around for about a year and a half, and we're the people behind Minder, which is the project we're going to be talking about today. So this is a multi-by-project talk because it deals with Minder, which probably you heard this morning that has landed in the OpenSSF sandbox. We're very happy about that. And it's also about the work that we're doing in the SIG security baseline in the OpenSSF. So let me start with the baseline. So what is the OpenSSF security baseline? Oh, there's some lag in my slides. So what is a security baseline? When you think about managing multiple projects, multiple repositories, a baseline, I really like this definition from NIST, is a set of minimum security controls that you want to have in your project. So basically, we're drafting a number of guidelines to make it easy for projects to have a bare minimum set of configurations and practices so that they can have some acceptable level of security with the least amount of effort. So basically, it's about doing the bare minimum to be as secure as possible. So the baseline touches on a number of areas around the projects. This is closely related to if you were at the scorecard presentation earlier. So our current draft touches on around these 5 areas. So it's access control, which involves things like who has access to push to your repos, who has access to change configuration, do you have multi-factor authentication so that they have to have a stronger requirements for logging in. And then that extends into other phases, which we'll go into a little bit more detail in a little bit, to ensure that the requirements become more stringent as the project grows, because as it grows, it also means that it's a more important project, and doing something bad from that project can harm more people. So beyond access control, we also have some checks around your builds and releases. So in the early phases, we establish easier controls, like are you executing arbitrary code while you build, and that escalates to requirements such as are you scanning your dependencies for vulnerabilities, and are you actually addressing them, passing through, for example, automated builds, because we would like to discourage people from building stuff in their laptops and instead prefer automated systems. Then there are some requirements around documentation, and not only documentation like helping people understand how to use the project, but rather are you transparently and collectively managing change in the project? Because anyone that can change project can break people and can also introduce insecure descent. So are you documenting those changes? Are you documenting the design proposals that go into your software project? There's some requirements about quality, such as basic things like are you using a version control systems like Git, for example, right? And then going up scalable. All of this is a work in progress. It's managed by it's been discussed in the SIG. Finally, there's some requirements around legal aspects of the project, like do you have a certificate of origin? Do you require a certificate of origin from your contributors? Do you have a license that falls into one of the accepted open source licenses? Is it discoverable? Do you have the license in a format that it's standard so that we can make sure that you haven't altered any of the text in it? So when you think about all of these requirements, it's hard to keep track of everything. So the first thing that the SIG is working on is ensuring that these requirements come only into effect once your project reaches a certain level of maturity. The idea is that the baseline is being drafted in a way that is agnostic to the maturity level of the projects, depending on which foundation or organization they belong to. And this is the way they map to the OpenSSF maturity model. So in the first phase is for projects in the sandbox, then for projects in the in incubation, and then finally for those graduated. When you look at this graph of the requirements, it looks like if you grow, you're going to have to do more and more work. But the reality is that it's not like that. So you have to do a set of requirements when you're in sandbox, then you can forget about them, and then when you attempt to move to the next phase, there are another set of requirements that you need to comply to make sure that your project is complying to the baseline requirements. And finally, another aspect SIG is working on is trying to understand if you meet these requirements, how do these requirements help you when trying to comply with other compliance frameworks? Like if I comply with the open source baseline from the OpenSSF, how does that help me when trying to meet FedRAMP or PCI or other requirements? So managing this at scale is hard, and you need help from machines to do that. So this is where Minder comes into play. So Minder is, as I said, the newest project landing in the OpenSSF. Minder is a security platform meant to enable building these sorts of checks and policies around them. So Minder, I don't know why it's not loading, but so Minder is the security platform, and the way it works is you notice that the logo is a marmot. And the reason why it is a marmot is that marmots are always alert of danger happening, and then I'll alert when something goes wrong. So Minder, at its core, it's a system that observes what we call entities. And entities can be several things in the software development lifecycle. So for example, an entity can be, hold on. Okay, so it can be a pull request, can be your version control system, GitHub, GitLab. It can be your artifacts that you release, or it can be your releases, for example. And the way Minder works is that you draft rules of the expected conditions in some of these. This model is extendable, by the way, so we're trying to go ever more wider in the things that we support. And so the way you write, so by looking at the information from these entities, we can check for things and start making sure that you're complying with things, like, for example, looking for provenance information in your releases or associated to your artifacts. So how do the rules work? So a rule is defines the expected conditions and how to get the information. We'll see into how they work. So rules are written in YAML. So Minder, our company was founded by one of the creators of Kubernetes, so it has a strong heritage from that side. So a rule is written in YAML, and you apply the rule, YAML, to the Minder server by using our CLI, much like you do with resources in Kubernetes. So when you apply a rule type into Minder, you essentially teach it new tricks, how to check for new things. And this is all defined. And don't pay a lot of attention to the YAML because it's scrubbed. We have some examples. But the rule essentially has 4 parts. So the first part deals with rule metadata, and it has things like the description, the name, the label that you're going to use to address it when you use the CLI. The second part has to do with the evaluation part. So how does the rule evaluate things to determine that something is out of compliance? The third part is how you ingest information. So where does Minder get the data it needs to enforce that rule? And the final part is the remediation. So there you put how, if the rule falls out of compliance, how do you help, how does Minder make it back to comply with the expected state? So once you start, once you write a rule, the idea is that you start adding more and more rules. And then when you have enough rules, you compile them into what we call a profile, which is essentially your policy. The profile defines the configuration for the rules. For example, if you have a rule that says, I want to have a number of reviews per pull request, the profile configures it to be the number that you want them to be. Like, you can have a profile for certain repositories that require 2 reviews per person and have another profile for another set of repositories requiring just 1, for example. And then once you write your profile, you can apply it in much the same way as you did the rules, and then Minder starts working. So how does Minder work? Okay. When you think about the profiles and the rules, you're essentially laying out, like, it could be similar to like a blueprint of your security posture. So you take that blueprint, which is your profile and its rules, feed it into the CLI. By using the CLI, you feed it into the Minder server, which is running, and then it will start looking at your resources. So for example, you have your GitHub repositories, and then you configure them to the state you want them to be in, and then once Minder learns about the profiles and rules you wanted to apply, it'll start the reconciliation loop, constantly observing your repository. So if anything falls out of compliance, say for example, someone goes in and messes with one of the settings that you don't, because they have access and you don't want that to be, Minder will notice a change. Come on. Notice the change, and then it'll essentially connect to that system. So in this case, if it's GitHub, it'll use the API to flick things back into compliance. And then once it's back in compliance, the rule will go back to green again. And so we have, for example, you can be monitoring your repositories in GitHub, but also, for example, in GitLab. And we're expecting to build support for other systems as the need arises. Essentially, if people want to contribute them or show some interest, we may be adding support for more. So there's as part of the project, we keep a library of actions and profiles that you can use to test out the project. Like, you can download any of these, check out the code, check out what they do. Minder can work in monitoring mode. You can turn off auto remediation if you only want you to alert. But the real spirit that we want to achieve here is that Minder fixes things for you. And the other thing I wanted to highlight is that you can download the whole Minder system and test it out, run it on your infrastructure if you want. We provide Docker Compose configuration if you want to run it locally. But my company also hosts a free forever instance for free for open source and open repositories that you can use to test. So let me see if don't know if I'll have time for the demo, but we can try. So I have. So this is our cloud. So this is the hosted instance that we run. In it, I have a repository already configured. So if I want to apply, so I only have one repository configured in my account right now. So I can add a profile. So this is using the graphical interface, not the CLI that I showed earlier. So I can, for example, select the dependency security repository, and then once I have it, the profile's name is dependency security, and that profile groups together a number of rules. Like, for example, do you have dependent turned on, or checking the dependencies that you introduce into the project. So for example, you'll see that auto remediation in the repository is turned on. So if I go to that repo and so auto remediation is turned off, right? But if, for example, in this repository I don't have the Pendefault configured, but if I were to turn on remediation, Minder will automatically open, will observe my repository, notice that it's missing the dependabot configuration for my repo, and open a PR adding the needed required configuration. Another example I can do real quick because I have just a few minutes left. For example, if I go to the code here, so I want to show how we can interact with external systems. So I have a branch here. I open a pull request. So I'm going to open a pull request introducing this Python dependency that I know that it's malicious. So, sorry, open source meetings. So I'll open a pull request. So as part of the rules that I have configured in this repository is that I want Minder to check the dependencies I'm introducing. So this pull request is introducing a known bad dependency, so it runs our vulnerability report. It has no CVEs because it's like a malicious package, so it has no reported ones. But this is running against another one of our products, which is connected to Minder. So it's checking my pull request entity against our service that analyzes packages and tell me that that package is malicious. So right now it's configured to only alert me, but you can block on the PR if you want that. Okay, so let me return to the presentation. And yeah, so as part of the work that we're doing with the baseline, we're compiling a profile specifically with the checks of the security baseline. So we're trying to follow closely behind the work that's been done in the OpenSSF baseline to make sure that we can give you the checks to comply. And yeah, so you can download that and apply it to your Minder instance or project, and then it should start checking some of the requirements already. So it's still a work in progress, but if you want to jump in and contribute, we're happy to take pull requests or discuss. So Minder is already in the foundation. The announcement, I think, was made during the keynote. There are more announcements coming, but so we already have a Slack channel in the OpenSSF Slack. So join us to ask questions. That's the github.com MinderSec is the new organization where Minder has been maintained. This is the information for the SIG defining the security baseline. We meet every Tuesday, so if you have ideas or proposals or ways that you would like to help building that, please join us to discuss. And yeah, so if you have any questions, I'm Puerco everywhere, and if you want to try the CLI I just showed, that's our company instance. And yeah, so thank you, and if there are any questions, I think we have a few minutes, but otherwise, thank you for being here. Yeah, okay, yeah, okay. Yeah, I don't have a mic, but I can repeat the question.
So, if you have branch protection rules with two owners.
1 second, I got a mic for you.
Sorry, just interested in the magic of Minder. If you have branch protection rules with two owners that need to merge, does opening a pull request in the remediation part, does that automatically merge?
No.
Okay, it's just open a PR.
Yeah, it's still a regular PR.
Okay, okay, cool. That was my only question. That was really magic there. Awesome, thank you.
No, not for you.
So, curious question. I see that there's lots of overlap with projects within the OpenSSF in general. Now that Minder's in, I maintain a project as well. How do you see Minder and Scorecard and All-Star and the whole universe kind of collaborating?
Yeah, collaborating. Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the only open question when we did the Minder donation into the foundation was how do we play along with Scorecard? So I'm going to give you my opinion as maintainer of this tool. Probably if you invite me, I can help. I would love to collaborate on Scorecard as well. So in my view, at least, is that Minder is in an architecture of many projects working together, should be like a layer below what Scorecard does. So in my opinion, so for example, you were talking during the Scorecard talk about, oh, we want to enable support for other, GitLabs and Bitbucket and all of those. In my opinion, Scorecard should not be dealing with that. So we should be able to provide you with the basics to be able to run those checks in other architectures. I understand that there are architectural and technical challenges to make that happen, but I would love to see a feature where no project has to deal again with looking into the basics of how do I observe a pull request and get its metadata. So if we can have one single plane that looks into that, and then you can tap the Scorecard probes on top of what we're observing, that would be ideal. And in the opposite direction, we are missing some of the things that Scorecard already does. So if we could find a way of collaborating so that we could run the probes inside of Minder, that would be the best, because we would be providing you with some basic fundamentals, and then you would be giving us some of those probes and increase augment the Minder ecosystem, which would be great. That's my opinion. I don't know if others in the project share it or you share it, but that's where I see the potential collaboration between the two. Any others?
You're right there.
So does it come with a lot of rules that are built in, or the user has to implement all the rules they want to?
So in that repository I showed, it's in the GitHub repo. We have about 30 rules that you can download and leverage. We have some example profiles that you can group around, repository security or dependency security. You can leverage those already, and of course you can write new ones if you want.
What are the other repositories you support except the GitHub?
I can barely hear.
What are the other repositories support you have, like the Bitbucket or maybe the AWS side, or maybe the Google have their own, right? The code repositories.
I cannot hear from here.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. What are the other repositories you support with this tool?
So right now we have GitHub, and we have experimental support for GitLab already. But if you need another one, we'd be happy to hear the use case, of course.
Okay. Yeah, like the AWS code commit, and there are some other steps also, right? AWS code commit and...
okay, yeah. I mean, that would be an interesting one, yeah, of course.
Okay.
All right. Well, if there aren't any others, well, thank you for being here. And we have a booth there. If you want to ask more questions, we're happy to take them.